In this sublesson, we're going to simply talk about reducing the number of rows that are brought from a source system into the Power Query Editor and then eventually loaded into the data model. So for example, in this query we have here, we have 5 columns and 7 rows. Column number 1 has several different values for the rows. We can see that the rows have the value of A, B, and C. Let's just suppose that in column number 1, we want to get rid of all the rows that have a letter A in it. We could then take advantage of the reducing rows capabilities in Power Query to go ahead and remove those rows from the query so they don't get loaded into the data set. Now, this is one of the best practices we want to adhere to, is to only bring the rows of data into Power Query, into the data model, and it has to pass through the Power Query Editor first. Only bring what you need and reduce out at the Power Query level the data that you don't. So let's go ahead and get ourselves into our sample Power BI file for this particular sublesson. Okay, so I have my GitHub files open. I'm just going to double click on the one here called Sales Data Mart SL0208 Start. Go ahead and open that Power BI desktop file open. Okay, so now that the Power BI desktop file is open, we're going to get ourselves into the Power Query Editor by your usual means by clicking the Transform Data command. We'll be brought into the Power Query Editor, and the query we're going to look at reducing rows from is this order date query. But before we go ahead and get rid of the rows that we want, let's just quickly go through the functionality here that is available in the Power Query Editor for removing rows. So if we are on the Home tab and move over to roughly the middle of the screen, we can see this group of functions here called Reduce Rows. So there's a number of different ways that we can go ahead and reduce the rows. So if I click the drop-down box next to this Remove Rows here, we can see that there is a way to remove the top rows from a data set. We can maybe remove the bottom number of rows, remove alternating rows, get rid of duplicates. We can get rid of blank rows in our data sets, and we can get rid of any rows that are errors. We also have the ability in this command here called Keep Rows to basically just do the opposite, to say that we want to keep a certain number of top rows, keep a number of rows from the bottom, keep a range of rows, maybe we want to keep the duplicates, or keep errors. So we have a couple different commands in here to go ahead and reduce our rows. So let's go ahead and get ready to reduce the data in our order date data set. And we're going to do that by going to the order date column here, and we can click this drop-down box right next to it. And here we can see that we're presented with a number of other ways to filter our data. So if I want, I can go down to these date filters right here, and I can go in and say, I want to take a look at the rows or keep the rows that are after a certain date. So I'm going to go here and click on After. Let the dialog box pop up. And now I can see that the dialog box is telling me I want to keep rows where the order date is after a certain date. So maybe I only want to keep rows in my data set that are after or on 2017 01 01. So after that date. But let's just suppose that I want to keep on or after. So I want to keep it as January 1st, 2017. In this drop-down box right beside it, I can say is after or equal to. So I want to keep this as the date, but instead of just saying after, which would not include January 1st, 2027, I can say is after or equal to. So once I've gone ahead and done that, I can click OK. And then now we'll notice that the drop-down box next to order date has a filter on it. And if we take a look over in the applied steps, we can see that the rows have been filtered out to only keep the rows in the order date file that are on or equal to the 1st of January of 2017. And if you want, you can go back into that drop-down box and see there's all kinds of different ways to go ahead and filter your dates, but that's good enough for this particular example here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the product query. So I'll click on the product query here, and we know by doing some inspection of this data, and this is something you just have to know in this particular data set, is that there's duplication of information. So there are products in here that repeat themselves twice. So they essentially have the exact same product key repeating themselves 2 times in this particular query. And we want to go ahead and do a deduplication of this. So the way that we're going to go ahead and do that is with the product key highlighted, we're going to go over to remove rows, click the drop-down box, and we're going to go in and say remove duplicates. So before I do that, I just want to draw your attention to the bottom right-hand side of the screen where we see the metadata that says there's 6 columns and 606 rows of data. So after I do this deduplication, my row count is going to drop from 606. Now let's just go ahead and run it. Say remove duplicates. And we can see now that the row count has dropped down to 504. So there were indeed some duplicate product keys in this query that we just got rid of. And we're going to see that later on when we move into the data modeling section, this is an ideal thing to do for any of the tables which are categorized as dimension tables. And we'll discuss what dimension tables mean once we get into lesson number 3. Okay, so quite simply, this unit or sub-lesson is quite straightforward. We're just learning how to remove rows out of our data set in Power Query so that we're delivering the right information and the right amount of information over into our data model.